Muy buenas tardes a todos y a todas, bienvenidos y bienvenidas al foro número 1, Era Digital y Seguridad de Productos. Queremos, en primer lugar, presentar a nuestros destacados expositores. Nos acompaña hoy Gustavo Rocha, jefe de la División de Relaciones Institucionales de la Secretaría Nacional del Consumidor del Ministerio de Justicia y Seguridad de Brasil. Queremos saludar también a don Rodrigo Mateluna, subdirector de Estrategia y Servicios a la Ciudadanía del Servicio Nacional del Consumidor Chile. Saludamos también a don Mauricio Horman, miembro de la Junta Directiva del Consejo de la Industria de Cosméticos, Aseo Personal y Cuidados del Hogar de Latinoamérica. Saludamos también a don Álvaro Fuentes, director de la Unidad de Defensa del Consumidor del Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas de Uruguay. Y sin más preámbulo, queremos invitar y dar la palabra a don Gustavo Rocha. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos y todas. Primeramente, quero agradecer a hospitalidade por parte da SERNAC, em la persona do Dr. Andrés Herrera, em la persona de Daniel e sua equipe. Muchas gracias. Bueno, hoje eu vou falar sobre a segurança de produtos em âmbito digital e a proteção de dados. Primeiramente, temos contexto
we leave on the internet. I started searching for airfare tickets, and then I started getting adverts of what to do in Chile. What are the best restaurants in Chile? What is the best season to go skiing? And I wasn't searching for that. I was just looking for an airfare ticket. So I think it's necessary that these advertising aggressiveness needs to be put in check. There needs to be a regulation about this. And there's also the matter that the consumer, in many times, depending on what they're purchasing, can't even realize a purchase contract in their native language. We end up accepting license agreements in English or in other languages. We do not know what is the jurisdiction of these agreements either. We do not know if we can return the products when we purchase them. And so we can have product safety. It's necessary that providers and suppliers provide the complete information to the consumer. The supplier needs to be responsible of the quality of the products that are presented to the consumer. They need to be clear and transparent when it comes to information. There needs to be also transparency in the purchasing process. There needs to be full protection and clear information of when the product will be delivered. Why is the platform permitting the sale of a product that's not original? There needs to be accountability for when something like that happens. There needs to be responsibility against frauds and scams that many people take advantage for in these platforms. Sometimes you want to sell or you want to buy something on a digital platform, but it turns out that it's a scam and the platform does not take responsibility. In Brazil, we have a platform that it's a consumer-to-consumer platform and is a source of many scams. I give the person the phone number, I select a publication, I contact the seller in this supposed platform, and when we agree the delivery of the products to a certain person, the value that is published in the platform will be paid once the person receives the product. But sometimes these are scammers that manage to circumvent the platform's security measures, and then they take advantage of people. And the platforms need to take responsibility for that. There's also the right to the information of the products. We're here to talk about that. And I think that the same aggressiveness that providers, companies employ to advertise to consumers, you can see a lot of consumers don't even know. They don't know what they're buying. They don't know what are the details of the product. In Brazil, that happens in TV advertisements as well. Nowadays, there are other sites like Netflix and among others, and you can see advertising campaigns on social media. The big data knows that Chile has a certain product and the consumer needs to receive the information regarding that. And I think that's a very important matter. And that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you. Up next, we will give the floor to Mauricio Horman. He is going to present about communication to the consumer, in particular when it comes to electronic labeling. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, SERNAC, for giving us this space. And I am representing CACIC, the Cleaning and Cosmetics Industry Council, and I am also the CEO of the president of the Cosmetics Chamber. We have a very extensive space, and we're always thankful of SERNAC's invitation to be able to construct, from the industry perspective, dialogue and product safety assurance and delivering information to consumers. We're talking about the labeling and electronic labeling of cosmetic and cleaning products. But first, we need to understand at an agency level and from a UN level the technologies of information and communications. By the end of 2022, over 3 billion people were already using internet, which is like 60% of the world population. We have the over 73% of the population has access to mobile devices, so now the technology is accessible for everyone. And we need to start moving forward. In the first place, we need to start moving forward in our care for the environment. In that sense, we take responsibility that at a global level, there is a tendency on what is labeling for cleaning and cosmetic products. And we need to have a consumer that is always better informed so they can have access to purchase safe products. But if we can't manage, we mismanage these two levers, these two trends, we can fall into the non-compliance of one of the goals of the OECD regarding responsible consumption. But we must never lose track that in the physical plane, and us as an industry, we want to reinforce that the physical labeling must ensure the safe usage of the product is available, so the consumer can access safe purchasing. In the same context, there's already an international precedent. There's already a worldwide law of digital use to fulfill with the rules that are already set. Here we have two examples to show you that that is already something that is happening. Chile is not being left behind. Our health authority already took the initiative. We have a public decree that regulates cosmetic products in the country, and it's already visibilized and contemplates the usage of digital media to deliver better information of better quality to the consumers. So at a local level, we're already taking the necessary measures to advance in this matter. And the same thing is happening worldwide. For example, in Korea, the case of Korea, they are already doing pilot companies to identify if the handling of this digital media complements the consumer towards responsible and well-informed purchasing. The same thing's going on in Europe. In that same line, same thing is happening in Europe. There are cleaning products that emphasize on the consumer, and they also indicate that they should prefer products that have less information, but the information is clearer. I am going to read the main conclusions that we've reached as an industry. According to us, the benefits for the consumer industry and authority. It facilitates access for the consumer to information. The consumer can no longer read the labels, and e-labeling allows presenting all the information that is considered relevant for the consumer, including in other languages, and it's constantly being updated. It reduces the information in physical labeling that increases space for the truly necessary information for the safe usage of the product. It allows the implementation of safety measures that prevent contraband and falsification. And it's very important at a worldwide level. The levels of counterfeit products and contraband is at an all-time high, and we need to avoid these kinds of markets. destroy the product's safety. And it also avoids the decisive burden on companies, the excessive burden when it comes to residuals, when it comes to packaging, and helping minimizing the use of packaging materials, paper, ink, and transportation spaces and storage. All of this supports the efforts of the industry towards a circular economy, promotes innovation, reduces cost, while not having to constantly update physical labels. We invite all authorities to continue working in this public dialogue with the private sector to promote legality, learn from other countries in the world, and advance as a region towards the implementation of practices that protect and put consumers first, analyzing the impact and the convergence of regulations for our industries. I don't know if I am inside the allotted time. My screen just turned off. Thank you so much.
Now we'll offer the floor to Mr. Rodrigo Mateluna. Thank you very much, Franz. We'd like to thank you for attending this workshop, and I will have to present the reality of the e-commerce in Chile, and particularly in terms of product safety. And to kick off, I'd like to mention, to quote some figures. This is for particularly delegations coming from other countries, which shows the increase of e-commerce in Chile. The projection by using data from the Chamber of Commerce in 2024, sales will conclude by e-commerce reaching a volume of 15 billion pesos in Chile, with a projection by 2029 of 20 billion pesos. And you can see on the slide, in the chart, that even the next year, we could also reach some levels reached during the pandemic, precisely a time when the pension funds were withdrawn, and also, since we were in lockdown, buying through internet increased a great deal. Some other data related to the per head sale is $500 annually, which places Chile in the first place in the region. That's also very interesting. It has to do with the present penetration of online market, which in Chile represents 15% over the total sales of the commerce, which have progressively been increasing. And that might be considered high for our reality, particularly within Canada, as a reference, has 14%, whereas Spain has 12%. And other factors on why this internet sales grows is given by three main factors: the massification of payment methods. Not for everyone is easy to buy through internet, the improvement in the logistic change. Probably people from SERNAC will say, okay, complaint says the opposite. But what's true about it is that they have improved the logistic chain, particularly the last mile, what has to do with the delivery of the product in our houses, and the explosive or exponential growth of salespeople that didn't do this before, as well as buyers due to the pandemic. Those factors need to be observed so that we can be clear about the context we are placed. I wanted to refer to the regulation in e-commerce, what has to do in the last period, in the last 8 years. There have been some important amendments affecting the product sales in e-commerce. Some of them are related to copyright, some other to free competition, as well as a very important event which seems to be daily, the sale of electric appliances and fuel has a seal or a label, the one from a SIC, and it can be proven through a QR code. This label means the product is certified to be sold in Chile. The National Service of the Consumer, SERNAC, during 2018 presented an important change in that structure due to a legal amendment, and which entitle us to audit. SERNAC is an auditing entity, and in 2019 issues a document on best practices, where it aims to generate clear and transparent information to the compliance of the supply safety within transactions and other matters too. And during this last period, let's say the last 3 years, in 2021, the regulation on e-commerce is published, the Pro-Consumer or Favoring Consumer Act, protection of personal data. It enshrines the right for distance purchasing, and there's also modifications in the Trade Code in 2024. The law for personal data protection is enacted, and there's some also modifications related to electric signature and electric documentation. Why do I think this is important? Before the analysis we have at the service, because it gives context to the e-commerce in Chile, so as to understand the size of this monster in a country where we have around 19 million inhabitants. And that has been a very important eruption. What I would like to present as SERNAC, we have some sources of information I will include in this analysis. Last year, SERNAC conducted an analysis on e-commerce whose main goal was to evaluate the availability and the quality of the information provided to the consumers in e-commerce in Chile. The study analyzed 22 e-commerce companies, including marketplaces, supermarket, retail, telecommunications, and 440 products from 11 different categories were also included. In this study, the compliance of the sectorial regulation was analyzed, included as labeling requirements, the law of the consumer, public advertising requirements, and also sectorial requirements. What is what we observed in general within this study? Well, I will quote results and then we'll talk about the findings. Generally speaking, the adjustment is perceived as low. It has to do with the non-compliance of online information for decision making by the consumer. In the sectorial requirements, and this is also part of the conclusions from the study, this lack of adjustment is higher. Then there's a minor adjustment in matters related to particular information on the product with certain regulation demanding a labeling to a technical regulation. And concerning this low non-compliance, there are some relevant aspects worth mentioning. There is a low non-compliance in bicycles and also children products. That's worrying. That can be mentioned, or that's the evidence we have in this findings, and I will refer to the main findings. First and most important is that we can evidence a huge difference between the information received by a consumer when buying a physical product versus a consumer who buys online. Also, some gaps can be verified regarding products warranties. Sometimes not very well informed circumstances, and in general the general requirements for labeling work well in what has to do with the product name, features and basic description, brand, but it doesn't work out well in those attributes which are particularly sensitive in terms of safety. That is, information that might, for example, be related to credit laws and technical norms. Something also important, product has different performances shown in this study. Amazingly, we noticed that national companies, amazingly it's not good or bad, national companies had a much better performance compared to the international companies regarding the compliance of the regulation. Same happened with companies or retail channels, online retail channels, compared to marketplaces. Online retail, higher compliance; marketplace, lower compliance to the regulation. And the product segmentation, let's talk about washing machines. They have the better compliance regarding the information. So in summary, due to time constraint, well, this information will be anyway shared, but some data can be found there regarding the complaints in relation to safety, product safety, and what are the most frequent complaints, as well as the most complained markets beyond the volume, because the volume is low compared to the universal complaints. This is a variable that's important, and it has to do with how these complaints and evidences in safety for the consumers and health for the consumers. You will see in the description foreign elements in food, inoquity problems, transport problems. Therefore, it's not a particularly high number. Those are situations worth being listened to, receiving attention. I will quickly present the general conclusions. Something that was mentioned is a challenge to correct the information asymmetries, aiming to provide tools which can improve the consumer's empowerment when buying online. It can also be observed that consumers have a lot of information, some of them very complex, generating a difficulty to process all data prior to the purchase decision making. This is also in a documentary at Netflix, this buy per click, which becomes very easy, but we realize the information is not always available, or we read it while we don't understand it. That's a sensitive matter in terms of consumers' protection. One important side out of here has to do with generating improvements by the suppliers. In the national market, there's an urgency to improve by companies the information delivery when it's relevant and sensitive in terms of warranty, instructions for use, and safety. And finally, in advertising aspects, advertising needs to be enough, useful, comprehensive to make an informed decision. Of course, we need to move on in this matter when it comes to digital inclusion and also hyper-vulnerability, social, age, or some disability segments. These are challenges we have in terms of protection, safety, and those need urgent attention. One more aspect, because, well, these adjustments have been pointed out related to what I have mentioned. This study, as a goal, had to separately evaluate the stages of purchase. If we have to place ourselves in the buy and sale stages, we need to focus on the post-sale stage, and it's given due to two reasons. The first one has to do with the warranty aspect. Warranty is subject to a sort of small print where the supplier, the buyer realizes about that. And secondly, aspects of safety in the transport affecting the product being received in terms of health, safety, and inoquity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Now we'll have the presentation by Mr. Álvaro Fuentes on the challenges on product safety. Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the organization and also the attendance. It's difficult to have people during these days. They usually use the online presentation rather than being in person. Well, again, Chile's organization is very good, everything very punctual, very well organized. Let's start with product and safety. Product safety, we've been working around that for a long time. Maybe you don't know this, but Chile is an outstanding country in this work. Numbers of alerts with their products is extraordinary due to the population you have and the amount of products that are ready to be sold and for consumption, and the hard-working campaign and education workshops. It's been important. From the other side of the Atlantic, we run into a problem of declaration. Brazil was the one having the best figures on the Mercosur side. In the South Cone region in South America, the Atlantic, and Paraguay, Argentina, Uruguay was terrible. Companies didn't use alerts in their products. At that point, with the creation of the Consumer Safety and Health Network on Mercosur level, we proposed to have a common regulation for alerts in order to see if we could reach the goals Brazil was reaching by using the CR tool just today. You'll see the changes. We went from no alert to 1, 2, 3 per year, which is very few. In 2019, the regulation by Mercosur is enacted, and then from 5 or 10 alerts, now we have 22 when we internalize it, and then 35, 65, and then it varies depending on the market variables, whether we have more or less or fewer alerts. This year there's a drop, and we understand there's something to be working around that in order to detect something that might be underdeclared, some products that probably receive no alerts. And for that, we got the CR, the alerts that were there or not. Safety of products and alerts is something that if it is not well worked out by the state, then companies are reluctant to issue alerts because they say, for example, I issue an alert, I'm transparent, I'm honest, and my competitor concealed their flaws, then I blame or I damage my brand. The private sector has always been present there. We need to work jointly to educate the population to say that the products generated in this industrial revolution, stated by our colleague from Brazil, then it is impossible that our products present no defects. So the brands alerting some defects are responsible, socially responsible brands. And the problem we have is that we need to make that more transparent. We need education around that, not only at our portals, but also in the mass media, particularly the written media, which reproduces our alerts, that in parallel they highlight that in cases where there is a company alert, the company is acting properly. You may see that in Canada, Japan, Australia, and Europe. These are the lines of business which present more alerts. Automotive industry, same happens with cars or vehicles. And usually they are European or American brands, Japan, Korea, and then we got other sectors, other countries which do not issue any alert. And this is not because European or Americans or Japanese or Korean manufacture bad cars. It is other companies which do not issue their alerts on defective products, such as airbags exploding, and damaging the occupants. Other cars with bad brakes, where the brake system does not work, which have very severe risking the occupants' lives and also the traffic around it. Brazil, at some point, has issued an alert of an European manufactured country, and in Brazil they changed the tires, and they went from zero. Well, they were from aluminum, and then the tires broke, and the accidents resulted in families' death. There was no alert for that, and Senacom, which is the safety entity for cars. This situation, the work done by the Agency of Consumers in that sense is pretty relevant, because we are talking about the consumer's life. These are the compliance rates. When we launched this regulation in Mercosur, we got the CIART and the OAS network. Some alerts were issued, and then we started observing. The results were not controlled. Companies only informed through a publication on the newspapers. Nobody read, and then nothing happened, and nobody presented to that alert. Or nobody can do that if they are informed that brakes are not working. Then we changed the law, and it says it doesn't matter the way you will launch your campaign. What it is important is the result. If nobody comes when I make this issue, when I issue this alert, then they use social media. You can track the case, traceability. In the case of
motor vehicles, it's easier to work on this and find the buyer, the consumer, when the alert refers to a product that was manufactured and sold recently. But when we're talking about a vehicle that was sold 5 years ago, maybe it's on its second or third owner, for the companies it's difficult to contact the buyer directly. And in that, there's also needs to be strategic alliances between the state and the suppliers, finding ways, ingenious ways, and alternatives to detect who is the current owner, depending on the license plate and the registry of motor vehicles, etc. And other types of products is more difficult. But we always need to be constantly working in that sense. The more efficient alert campaigns, what we're looking for is reviewing the texts that are proposed by the companies when an alert comes up. We call it a washing or an attenuation of risk, make it more impactful, more direct, so the consumer that sees this in the press understands that a risk of losing brakes means losing brakes, and not use ambiguous language, and make it clear for the consumer that the recall is a serious matter. We're also talking about, when we're talking about consumption, we're talking about the symmetry between provider and consumer. There's a symmetry also between the state and the consumer protecting agencies. We have information, we understand the topic and the matter, and the consumers and media are not. And that is something that we also need to collaborate in. Uruguay needs to develop a habit, and I know that Chile has that habit, and we work coordinated with the private sector. We are not interested in indexes and files and sanctions that were applied. What we are interested in, policy-wise, is that this is efficient, that the campaigns happen and that they are done well. That way, I don't need to enforce any sort of sanction, and open any files. And also has to do with loyal competition matters. Everybody that has products that have a flaw, they need to recall them and not just part of the small number of companies. That way we can also work on the number of campaigns and the officials that we have reviewing content of what is published, and if results every 60 days, the companies need to report, and if the office decides to shorten the time frame, then depending on the results that are provided, we can ask more frequent reports, and we can request text changes if the results are not being satisfactory. The impact of digital technology. I'm going to give an example. We released a regulation in Mercosur, the information that needs to be available in digital media and consumer protection. At the time, we opened the file on Mercado Libre. Mercado Libre called us. They said that the regulation gave them trouble. Before we made that law in Uruguay, we invited everybody, chambers, important companies, and law firms that were assessing and advising the other companies. We made them know the regulations to do the necessary adjustments, and in a few months later, we started with enforcement. And Mercado Libre, since they're an intermediary, they have buyers and suppliers. So that put them in a tight spot. And they said, okay, you forced us to improve. You were the first company that started enforcing these matters and gave us a sanction expedient. We thought we were complying with the regulations, and we were not doing them. They did an AI-powered sweep of all their suppliers, because many of them started years ago creating a user forum